Good morning and welcome to From A to Z. Let's prepare for turbulence. So the way I'm seeing it, there's a lot going on and there's a lot of different perspectives, and so I'm going to try to break it all down and try to look forward. I'm going to try to look at the present and look forward into the future and see, what it is that I think I should be doing, and maybe you can figure out what it is you need to be doing. So obviously we're in a political situation in which we are highly divided. It's undeniable that we are leaning towards fascism. Like, the way that the government has been operating since the inauguration here in 2025 is very authoritarian, very king-like, very acting without any fear of any kind of reprisal. They clearly don't care what's going to happen. And so how do you battle that? Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, ultra authoritarianism is coming. The technologies that we have enable them, like your cell phone, your internet, your social media presence. These are the things that we're using to organize and share messages amongst each other. But these are also the very tools that they're using to track you, to put things into your mind, to advertise to you things you don't need. And the thing that couldn't have been predicted by anyone, really, is that we would live in a time of such disparity and inequality while also having thousands of flavors of ice cream and readily available food and pizza and junk and entertainment, Spotify and Netflix and everything else. Like, we have everything at our fingertips, and because we have all of this cheap plastic goods at our fingertips, the average person doesn't feel like they're living below the lowest serf of the Middle Ages. But in fact, the disparity points to the gap being that wide once again. The 1%, the 800 or so people in the US that are more rich than everybody else, including most people in the world, they are living better than the kings of old. They are and you could say, like, technologically, so are the poorest people on the earth. Not the poorest, but the low income people that have smartphones and internet and all the other things. You could say, oh, you're living way better than a serf, in a sense. When it comes to the cheap plastic crap and the ability to just do amazing things like be on social media, yeah, we're living better than the worst serf was living, or the best serf was living. We're living better than the king was living, technically. But that's just a product of the things that we have. It's not saying that the disparities and the inequalities don't exist. And that's kind of how that has been used to twist our minds about whether or not we're actually being oppressed. And you're in a lucky position if you can debate whether or not you're being oppressed. And if you think that you're not being oppressed and this is actually the way the world should be going, then you are actually of the most highly privileged class of people. And I mean that regardless of your ethnic origin, your national origin, any of that. Because if you can honestly look at this system and say that the system is working exactly as intended and you're okay with that, then I mean, either you've just been totally brainwashed into accepting abuse, or you are benefiting from that abuse. That there's no two ways about it. Like, it is mathematically proven. There's no arguing whether or not the inequality and the disparity exists. So if you're one of those people still trying to argue that it doesn't exist, you're just plain wrong. Like, the math is not on your side. And you may for ideological reasons, be holding on to conservatism as the only way that people should be operating. But that doesn't work for most people. And there is no world in which everybody following orders and following instructions and doing what they're told leads to prosperity. It's not. That is what leads to the slaughterhouse. And that's where we are now. And it's undeniable. So if you're watching this and you're going, I don't know what country he's talking about, you are asleep. You are 100% blind and asleep, and you probably need to be listening, and you probably need to go listen to more people than just me. You need to really get down in there and see like what is going on, that you honestly believe the system works when millions of people are telling you it's not. So, and the math and the science is telling you it's not, because a couple of metrics I'd like to point out are like GDP. GDP is the one thing that we judge our entire society on instead of quality of life. And it doesn't matter how good the GDP is doing if the country is not doing any better. And if the country was doing better, we wouldn't have the political divisiveness that we have. We don't have political divisiveness because some people want Coke and some people want Pepsi. It's not simply a matter of red and blue. It actually is a matter of like people who care for the future of our society being a thriving, diverse, and beautiful society, and the other side of our society saying that the only way we can survive is through murder, enslavement, and as many authoritarian, abusive systems as possible. And as a person who believes in technology as the way out, it's really hard to push that message right now, because the technologists are the people who most seem like they are aligning themselves to become our rulers. So I don't fear the president. I fear the tech oligarchs who have bought the president. I fear the people that own the very platforms that we're going to watch this information on, because that is our next king. That is our true oligarchs. And they control everything right now, and it's only going to get worse. And I don't see how completely removing yourself from technology helps, because then you're isolated and you can be in your community, but your community's isolated. And I think to a degree it is important to build, not to a degree, like it is important to build your community. It is important to have IRL flesh interactions with the people that you would most be aligned with in an emergency situation. If you don't know your neighbors, you're doing it wrong. However, I think we still need the internet to know what everybody else is doing. We wouldn't know about the atrocities going on in the world if it wasn't for TikTok and if it wasn't for Instagram. And so these tools that they're using to control us, to sell us things, are the exact same tools that we're using to tell each other important messages. So it's clear that the technology is important. Like, we need this technology to get our messages out. But we also are going into a system in which capitalism is losing all of its control to the tech overlords, to the oligarchs. And they are in control of the market. When you have Apple, which is worth like 17% of the United States economy, like that company being worth 17%, I mean, that's one company. So it makes it to where these companies are more important than the government in which the company exists. And we don't want to live in a world in which corporations can design how the government is going to act. but we do. That is exactly what's been going on. Our entire political history is the political history of corporations forming a country. The United States has never been a country for the people. It has always been for the capital. Like, United States is the shining statue and emblem of a capitalist nation. And all we've done for 300 years is fight other countries. We call it independence. We broke them free of feudalism to let them go into capitalism. And any other forms of government that were tried, we utterly destroyed. So, not because of the government status, but because of how the money would be treated. The reason we hate socialist countries is because they're not capitalist enough. And that's the reality is, Americans have been brainwashed to believe that we should be struggling, that we can get the American dream if we just suffer enough. And it's a weird allegory, like a weird one-to-one with the idea of you suffer in life to go to heaven. And it's you can get heaven on earth if you suffer in life too. That's the lie that capitalism teaches you. It takes that whole religious thing and says, hey, you don't have to wait till you're dead to get all that. You can actually just suffer here on earth and we'll get you all that. But the reality is you won't. You'll never get all that. And maybe, the boomers had that American dream and they squandered it. They have 100% kept all of the jobs, kept all of the homes, and ensured that Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z get nothing. So that is the problem we're dealing with conservatism, is that the oldest and richest people in this country, and when I'm not talking about the billionaires at this point, I'm just saying anybody who had it easy has stacked assets and kept easy jobs and done everything they could to remain in power and done nothing to help their children. They've taught their children this rugged individualism and now wonder why their children want nothing to do with them. And it's because you've abused us our entire lives, and when you go, you're not going to leave us anything. And even if you were going to be able to leave us anything, the laws that you have created behind you have ensured that the government will be able to take at least 20% of everything you were planning to give to us. And that's the reality, is the boomers have 100% ruined the economy and voted to ruin the economy. And it is simply because of racism. It is because at every single level, the Republicans and the Democrats both have convinced you to give up your rights for freedom, for economic prosperity, and you didn't read the fine print. You seriously thought I can vote on things that only hurt Black people and only hurt immigrants. And when those things come to roost and they come to squat right on your chest and take a giant shit on it, you won't admit it. And that's the reality, is we've been getting had. Nixon got us, Reagan got us, and the things that the Democrats have done for us are just handouts. The Democrats don't actually want to help anyone achieve anything better. They're not trying to make you financially independent. They're not trying to make you financially educated. They're literally saying, here's some money, vote for me next time or you won't get this money again. Those handouts don't do anything to actually aid anyone pulling themselves up out of the gutter. It is literally pushing you down further into the gutter, because these welfare programs, you're not allowed to have other sources of income. If you are getting food stamps or some other kind of welfare help, and then you make money, that money you make will make you not eligible for the food stamps or the welfare. And when you can't make enough money to make it worth it, you look at it and you go, all right, well, I get, I don't even know what the numbers are, but let's just say you get $2,000 a month and you can get a job and the job's only going to pay you $1,300 a month. You can only choose one. I'm going to choose to take the $2,000 and not work if that's the more money option. even if it's 2,100, let's say I can work, 40 hours a week and I'm only pulling 2,100 at the end of the month. Am I going to work 120 hours out of the month to make an extra $100, or am I just going to go with the free 2,000 and then, survive on that, or potentially do like some underground stuff to make cash? Like, you've pushed that person now into having to have a cash business and tax evasion because they can't actually get any help that's going to help them get to a better level. They can only get help that's going to keep them at the same level or accept no help at all. And that to me is not, if that's what we're voting blue for, that's not worth it. Because that is just slowly like eroding away the poor people, just making them poor, eroding the middle class, ensuring that there is absolutely no way to get out of the trenches. And that's really how I see our political system. We have two right-wing parties. We have the ultra-right, which is pushing us towards racist, conservative, misogynistic values in which women and minorities are treated as property. And we have the centrist right, which is basically like pushing globalism and capitalism and trying to ensure everyone is a little worker bee and a cog, and that's all it wants you to be, is a worker bee and a cog. There is no moving up in society via the Democrats either. It's not there. There's no upward mobility in this country because of our political parties. Our political parties would like us to remain a servant class, and they're doing everything they can to make that possible. They're even giving away our government to the tech oligarchs to make that possible because they think it will give them the control, not realizing, no, you are just creating an all new system in which you will not have any control. Zuckerberg and Musk and all the people that created these social media and other like platforms that we're living on, Google, the internet, they own it now. You are on leased property. We are entering techno-feudalism. And that's one of my biggest fears right now, is that, yes, we are experiencing fascism. But there is no, we're experiencing fascism, and a lot of people think that we are actually in the process of killing capitalism, and I agree. The problem is, I don't think the thing coming on the other side is any better for the community. I think that what comes on the other side is actually another dark ages. I think we're going into techno-feudalism in which, it is going to be a very long period of us struggling under these tech oligarchs and owning nothing. That is one of my big pet peeves, is buying things does not imply ownership. You spend money every month with Amazon and Netflix and Spotify to own nothing. They just delete it. They're going to be erasing everything from Kindle. You can't download your music. You can't download your books. You can't download your movies. All of these things are just more and more fences. It's more and more subscription fees and rental fees, and everything you do in life is going to charge you. And it's hard to even promote the use of AI and cryptocurrency in this case, because AI is for sure learning you. And if there's something more dangerous than a social media algorithm learning you, then it is literally an intelligent being learning everything about you and taking all that information and using it against you. I don't want to live in a world in which the smartest beings in the world are controlled by the richest, most evil people in the world. And that's where we're headed. And then the same thing with cryptocurrency. It's I do see cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum especially, as an escape from the US dollar. And you're going to need this. If the US dollar is going to collapse, you're going to need to have your assets in currencies that are easily transmittable to other international currencies, whether it's because you end up leaving this country, or you end up, staying in the country through a rough time period. And then on the other end, once a new currency is formed or whatever, a new nation is formed, like then you're able to go out of your cryptocurrency into the new currency. And you're not going to be able to do that if you hold dollars. You're not going to be able to do that if you hold stocks, because as this country goes down the toilet, those things won't be worth anything. Those things won't be able to buy you anything. So that is why I believe in cryptocurrency as that like life raft or that inflation hedge, where you are keeping your assets in a place where if you had to flee the country, or if you were stuck under a fascist regime, you would have your assets safe and away from anyone that could take them from you. However, if we build a techno-feudalistic world in which, everything is being monitored, then cryptocurrency just enables that. It just makes it easier to figure out who people are. There's no privacy at this point in cryptocurrency, and all it takes is your wallet address getting flagged, and now an exchange that you would use to turn cryptocurrency into usable dollars is going to bar you from being able to make transactions depending on your political status and depending on your social status. And if it's really getting dystopian, depending on whether or not you're within a geo-fenced area. Because that's the other thing here, is that like we think about these borders as these national borders as these hard lines that with checkpoints that you have to cross. But the reality is that as the technology gets stronger and more harsh, we're not going to need physical checkpoints. It will just be that when you get out of your allotted area, your phone doesn't work anymore. Your money doesn't work anymore. Like nothing works for you because you are illegal. You are out of your zone. And that's the kind of things that are coming if we allow it. That's the kind of things that are going to happen if we don't stand up to these tech oligarchs. And as much as I hate the government, we need a government. Like I don't mean we need this government. I mean we need a government. Like I am 100% a person who believes in society. I guess you can say I'm kind of an anarchist in the sense that I think that people should live as they want. I don't think society should be overbearing on the individual. I don't think society should be overbearing on a community. I think that the government should be there to ensure that the weakest among us are being treated fairly, not as a bludgeon to keep everyone down, which is what's been going on. Like the reality is that the reason our country is the way it is not because of the Republicans or the Democrats alone. It's because the Republicans constantly push us right, further thinking only about money. And the Democrats' job is to hold the status quo. So when the Democrats have the ball, they never run it home for a touchdown. They literally just keep everything the Republicans did intact and just hold it in place until they can get the football back and run it further right. Because Democrats do not want you to be free any more than the Republicans do. They are all doing what they can to keep us down, period. The Democrats do not want you to succeed, period. End of story. They want themselves to succeed. They want you politically attached to them. They want you politically needing them. And if they did anything to set you free, anything to help you financially for real, then you wouldn't need to vote for them every time. They don't actually offer you anything except for not punching you in the face like the Republicans do. So, of course, we're going to choose the party of not punching me directly in the face. I'm going to choose the party that isn't violently attacking me. But it doesn't mean that they're not doing everything in their power to bankrupt me. It doesn't mean they're doing anything to help me whatsoever. And that is the reality. So people who are actually further left than the Democratic Party are being demonized as the real villains here, because the reality is, like, if you want things to change, it's going to get uncomfortable. And I'm not being an accelerationist because I understand how harmful that is to minorities and women and, even myself. It's an accelerationist will harm themselves. So I am not an accelerationist. I'm not saying, burn it all down right now. What I'm saying is the obvious. It is slowly going down. And the reality is that we're going to have to replace this system with something better. And nobody wants to do that right now. Everybody is still stuck on their 401k and their stocks. And if you are integrally bought into the system, if you 100% cannot detach your life from the things that you need to purchase every day, then you are bought into it. You would rather fascism than the lights go off. You would rather hear your neighbors being drug away in the night than Netflix not work tomorrow. And that's scary. That's the scariest thing here, is that I honestly don't believe that we have any anti-fascists in this country. I think that the fact that the far left has been villainized to the degree that the far right has is insane to me, because yes, I get it. Leftists want to kind of see the world burn, but not because they want everyone to be in pain and suffering, but because they want the world to come back as a system that actually cares for people. And the only way to get to that new system is to burn this one down, because liberalism is not going to destroy fascism. End of story. Like, there is nothing about the Democratic Party that is prepared to fight the Republicans in this matter. There is nothing the Democrats can do, because they still need their donors. They are still just corporate shills. Like, that's it. And that's what's really wrong with our government, is that we don't have a government that is separate from the corporations. The corporations have lobbied and bought our government. Other countries have lobbied and bought our government, and we're not in control. So the only moral, and I say that, the only moral stance to take is to be further left than the Democratic Party. The Democrats are not here to help you. The Republicans are not here to help you. The two-party system is not here to help you. And I don't see how the American system can be reworked from the inside. The reality is that it's just going to become tech oligarchy. There is nothing here that's valuable or worth saving. Democracy is broken. There is a 30% chance of something getting put into law, whether or not the American people want it. The reality is that our desires for what the country should look like are not at all what our politicians are thinking about. Period. End of story. This whole thing is a transfer of wealth from the poorest people in the world to the richest people in the world. And the only reason the U.S. has ever let immigrants in is for free labor, cheap labor. That's it. Period. So I don't pretend to know where we're going from here, but I know that it's not going to be pretty. I don't see this resolving itself peacefully. I don't see the billionaires just loosening the purse and starting to take care of people. I foresee a lot more death due to climate change and inequality. And I don't know if that leads to a physical revolution, but I don't see what other choice people are going to have. Because if the technology is being used against us, the money is being used against us, then the only thing you end up left with is your body. And no one is convinced that using their body within this system is going to get them freedom. So it's going to come a degree where people don't have anything left because you've taken it all. And that's when it comes. And that's when it gets ugly. And like I said, I'm not pretending to know what comes next, but I know that we're not even trying to address it. And I know this isn't a what about, this isn't a gotcha, but the problem is that even the most far left people, we're still addicted to this life. Like, if there are far left people who aren't addicted to this life, we don't know about them because they're not on TikTok to tell us about it. They're not on Instagram to tell us about it. So if there is a really far left movement that's doing well, we'll probably never know about it under the current state of things, because anybody who's truly far left that's doing well has probably found a way to completely erase themselves from the tech oligarchs and just go completely unnoticed. And I don't even know if that's possible at this point. So prepare for turbulence. Put your mask on. You're going to need to find your inner peace. You're going to need to find your own ability to do things. You're going to need to find your skills. You're going to need to know how to protect yourself, how to do a lot of things. It's just really, if you don't know how to do basic things like grow food and, filter water and, just being able to, in general, take care of yourself, you're going to end up in a situation where you're going with the crowd, whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like, but I know this, look, if we're actually, not to fearmonger or anything, but if we're actually going into an era of revolution or violence or, fascist violence, anything, then I have a small glimpse of the world here. Because I was in New Orleans during Katrina, and it was bad. People suddenly, all the lights went out in the area, and the power went out, and the cops couldn't get anywhere, and the world was flooded in a small zone. And everybody pretended the world was over. People started looting and shooting and raping and killing, and it was the cops too. I'm not just talking about the poor people. Everyone who could took advantage of the situation and took advantage of other people. And one of the worst parts of it is all the poorest people who didn't evacuate ended up in the Superdome with no power and no water. And it turned into the worst place you can imagine, where children were being assaulted by grown men, where grown men were then being beat to death by other men after doing those acts. It was a complete, insane, end of the world situation. And the reality is the lights were on less than 50 miles away, less than 100 miles away. And that's what's going to happen if the United States falls into fascism. The lights will go off, the internet will go off, the water will stop flowing, and people will act like the whole world has ended because their world has ended. So now they will suddenly be justified in killing their neighbors. And they won't feel bad at all, because the other sick, sad part about American society, or even maybe the whole globe, is that evangelicalism, or any religion at all that believes in a rapture or any kind of apocalypse, is actually praying for this to happen. If you're a Christian, this is gives you some kind of hard on to think that there's going to be a struggle and a rapture and people are going to die. The fact that we have a population that truly wants these things to happen is sick and sad. We live in a world where I'm pretty sure greater than 50% of the entire world is praying for the world to end. That is insane. Could you imagine any other species being that destructive, to actually be sending out into the universe that you want your entire species to suffer and die because of some insane belief that you hold over a book that was written by goat herders 2,000 years ago. Like, as a species, we're just sad. We just have all of these ideas. Like, we are the quote unquote most brilliant species that has ever existed. And yet we have an invisible man in the sky that forces us to murder each other. That is psychosis. It's not normal. It's not like, it's insane. Like, to actually, in the scope of existence, to think that like we are the species that is leading the charge of all species, that's insane. Like, we don't deserve this. We are violently hateful. Like, we just want to kill each other. We just want to kill others. And the reason our politics are the way they are is because even the most quote unquote liberal person dreams of violence towards people that don't fit into society the way they want to. And the reason I'm saying that is because a liberal person may not have violence towards immigrants, or they may not have violence towards, their neighbors or friends of color. But they definitely want the violence to be visited upon the Trump supporters. And the Trump supporters are the ones that want to visit the violence upon everyone else. And so, like, we as a liberal people will use our anger towards the defenseless to say, oh, we should be abusing those people that are abusing the defenseless people. And in reality, like, it is all a fantasy of violence. And that's why we can't get anywhere in politics, is because, yes, one side has more compassion than the other, and the other side is just openly hateful. But the reality is that both wings of the bird want to see the world function as it is. And the reality is that there is nothing you own, there is nothing you do that is not related to the subjugation and the enslavement of another person. So that is the big lie that liberals tell themselves, is that, like, this is just the way the world works. And so the conservatives can at least admit that they're okay with the violence. They don't care if Indonesian children are making their clothes. They don't care if there's humans in cobalt mines making the solar panels and the cell phones and everything. Like, they don't care. They're actually okay with that world. Whereas liberals try to pretend they're not okay with that world, and they're slowly pushing it towards more human rights. But the reality is, their stock prices can't adjust to that any more than the conservatives can. So they speak a good game when they don't actually intend to change anything whatsoever, because their pockets rely on it going this way. So we want to believe, people like myself want to believe, that using technology like AI and automation will set humans free. But the reality is that as long as the whole point of these things is to make profit, if profit is the goal, not quality of life, not quality of the earth, not humans that we can save and, make whole, not humans that we can feed and clothe and make the entire society better, the only thing that matters is my personal profit. Whether or not I can buy, more stuff, whether or not I can get compound interest. And this is where capitalism has totally twisted our entire species, because money is useful. Making money the entire basis of your society and the most important thing in your society totally subverts all of your values. Now, all of a sudden, everything you hold important in your soul has to be measured against the dollar. Our values are measured against the value that it creates. And that is so insane that we have the same exact word for the things in ourselves that make us better, the things that we find to be important, and then money. The word value transcends both your beliefs and your lack thereof. And that's insane to me. So I'm not pretending to have all the answers. I'm not pretending that I'm some great person who's doing it all right. You know, we're all victims and we're all perpetrators. We all do things that make us guilty of this system. And it really does come down to you and your soul saying, like, do I actually want this system to change? Like, do I actually want to see a world in which there are no slaves? Do I actually want to see a world in which people who are terrible at money or terrible work ethic are doing just as good as me? Because that's really what it comes down to, is like, even the most left-leaning liberal person truly does have somewhere in their heart this idea of meritocracy. And I'm not saying this to say, like, there are no leftists, all leftists are impure. What I'm saying is that this is the reality of the world we've all lived in. So you were raised in this world. Your ability to remove yourself from those things is a long, hard road. And even myself, like, I'm sure there's many left people that have watched my content or in general have seen me talk about crypto or AI and are like, oh, you're just a liberal. You're just as bad as them. Like, there are some people who, we all have our things that we are boycotting. And if you're not boycotting what I'm boycotting, that makes you a bad person, because I think everybody should be doing the things I'm doing because the things I'm doing are the most effective. And so that little, like, split in beliefs makes it to where the ideological purity test that we all pass on each other. And none of us are perfect. None of us are pure. All of us are in some way benefiting from slavery and the theft of the United States. Like, you are living under colonialism, and there's no way that you're not benefiting from it. Even the most downtrodden people in our American society have access to things that people in other societies won't have access to. I'm not saying that makes up for the abuses. What I'm saying is that we are all benefiting from the system, whether or not we're actually the prime beneficiaries. So the only thing that really takes down the system is being able to, like, remove yourself from it as much as possible. And that's one of my biggest political things, is taking your money out where you can. I understand that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. I understand that every good that you buy will in some way be immoral, unethical, but you can still make adjustments to your purchases. You can still avoid prison labor, for instance. You can still avoid products that you know directly support slavery products, like Nestle. Nestle wants slave chocolate. They want to privatize water. Like, there's a lot of companies that you can draw a line in the sand with and say, I will not support this person. And I'm not going to judge what you should be doing. And you can judge what I should be doing if that's what you want to do. But the reality is that there is no ethical consumption, and we're all doing the best we can. And what I say is removing your money from the system as much as possible and doing something with it that you think is valuable. So it depends where you are, depends what your status is and how much you can afford to do. But, you know, if you can save all of your money and turn it into what I call blood-free investments, because, like, the stock market, I think, is full of blood. Like, it is full of captured wages. There's not many stocks, if any stocks you can buy that are not covered in blood. Cryptocurrency, on the other hand, there's no one participating in cryptocurrency by force. Everyone is there by volunteer. No one has put money in. No one was forced to put money into cryptocurrency. So I do think this is one of those things that you can trade more ethically. So if you can save your money, remove it from the system, put it into cryptocurrency, put it into a home, and I understand that's a lot to a lot of people saying, oh, you should just buy a house. Like, no, I'm not saying it's easy. But what I'm saying is, and I'm not even saying it's possible, but don't go the nihilistic route of saying, oh, because I can't buy a house, because I don't know how to trade crypto or whatever, I'm just going to keep putting all my money back into the system. Even if all you do is hoard your dollars and never put them back in the system, you are still doing better than just submitting and just subjugating yourself to McDonald's, just subjugating yourself to cheap products. Learn to cook, learn to farm, learn to filter water, learn to save your money. I think financial literacy is important even to a leftist, because the reality is whatever our new system is, it's still going to rely on money. Capitalism and mercantilism are two different things. The ability to trade money for goods is something that we want to exist. You don't want to live in a world without money, because then you have to think about who actually is controlling the resources. And I understand that we're already in a system that we don't control the resources. But the new system, if we don't end up under techno-feudalism, if we actually do break capitalism for something better, there's still going to be some transfer of value. And so preparing yourself for the other side is important. Preparing yourself for the potential lights going out, the revolution, whatever's going to happen, yeah, you need to prepare for that too. But if you think that you're not going to need assets, I don't think that's true. When the lights go out in the United States, commerce will still exist in the rest of the world. And so whether or not you're going to stay in this country and wait for the lights to come back on, or you're going to be a refugee and flee to another country, you will be glad if you get to that other country and you've got Bitcoin to sell for a new currency. You've got Ethereum to sell for a new currency. And I'm not saying it's a perfect system. I'm just saying that, to me, cryptography is one of the few technologies we have out there that actually protects people. And it's one of the few things that we have that we can, invest in and hope to have something on the other side. Because your bank account isn't going to do it. Your dollars aren't going to do it. Your stocks aren't going to do it. And your house might, but who knows what the government's going to look like on the other end of this. So put your mask on. Prepare for turbulence. You need to put your mask on. You need to be in this mindset, because you won't be able to help anyone else if you're in a panic mode. And so I'm not saying in some liberal way like, oh, just, buy stocks and ride it out and act like everything's going to be okay. No, what I'm actually saying is you need to be prepared for the lights to go out, but you also need to be prepared for the lights to come back on. And if you're not thinking about when the lights come back on, then you're not actually helping build a better world. You're only accelerating the destruction of this one. And that is necessary, but we need people on the other end who are going to put this back together. And I don't know what that looks like. And I'm not claiming to be the one that's going to do it. And I think there's a lot of people that would say the last thing we need is more white men forming how the world should be working. And so when all of this comes crashing down, we'll see who steps forth as the new government, as the new world leaders. Yeah, we're in interesting times, very interesting times. So you need to be in a good headspace to be able to help other people. You need to meditate. You need to exercise. You need to keep your head about you. You need to be writing. You just need to be cleaning your mind and cleaning your body and preparing yourself for what's going to be a rough period of time. We're just getting started. So prepare for turbulence. I'm sure people disagree with a lot of the things I'm saying, and I'm sure I'll even change my mind on some of the things I'm saying. And that's the real point here, is to remain flexible, keep your mind open, and just, be ready for anything, And if you have other stuff you'd like to, please feel free to comment. Tell me whatever you think. I might reply to some of those things if I feel like it's a really important thing that needs to be addressed. Maybe I'll take that up in another episode. And this was really just very blank in general. I didn't know what I was going to do going into this, and I would like to do this more often. It's just kind of, instead of scripting and things I've done in the past, I try to just do this off the top of my head and a lot of things I've been thinking about. And yeah, the Republicans are not going to save you. The Democrats are not going to save you. Democracy is not going to save you. You need to really think about that when you say, oh, we live in a democratic nation and, voting matters. You need to think about the people who wrote the Constitution and what their actual intentions were. Because when they wrote the Constitution, they did not have you in mind. I promise you. When they said we the people, they weren't talking about you. That's abundantly clear. That's abundantly clear with all of our politicians right now. On both sides of the aisle, our politicians are pissing down our backs, and they're telling us it's raining. We may not even actually be living under a true fear of fascism. We might be living under a completely media-manufactured fascism. I'm not saying that this current administration is not acting fascist. What I'm saying is that fascism is actually counterproductive to capitalism. And fascism, you can kind of think of it as the violent arm of capitalism. Like, capitalism is peaceful as long as it can control the people. Once the system is no longer controlling the people, they turn to the guns, which is what was always there in the first place. The dollar is backed by violence. The only reason the dollar is the global reserve currency is because of the $840 billion a year spent on our defense. The only reason the dollar is the reserve currency is because of the threat of violence if it was not the world's reserve currency. So we're going into a very ugly period, and we are the villains. If you are a United States citizen, you are already a villain. When you think about the villains of Germany, you don't think about the citizens inside the country who were resisting. Why? Because those people were dead or villainized. The liberals in 1930s Germany were Nazis. If you're a liberal, if you're a Democrat in 2020 America, you're a Nazi too. All you're trying to do is perpetuate the system. If you're not trying to work to change the system, then all you're asking is that the system keep going. And that means that you are willing to accept fascism and authoritarianism to make sure that your mortgage and your stocks retain value. You need to be open and admitting what it is you're doing here. We need to be working towards something greater, because if you just think that pushing the right-wing party of the Democrats a little bit to the left is going to do it, you are absolutely wrong. This is a party that less than 10 years ago was against gay marriage. This is a party that does not want to help you. Like, if they wanted to do the loan forgiveness and all these other things, they could have done anything they wanted, just like the Republicans do. They refuse. The blood on the hands of the Democratic Party is just as much as the Republican Party. The only difference is the Democrats are polite. And so if you think politeness matters, then you are just perpetuating slavery. You are just perpetuating violence and genocide. You are 100% reliant on the prosecution, the persecution, and the abuse of other people to maintain your lifestyle. And you need to be honest about that. Prepare for turbulence, friends.